Let's move on. Let's turn our attention confronting a growing terrorist threat in ISIS. The United States has led a coalition in airstrikes, but experts say strikes alone won't win the battle. The administration says we will not commit ground troops. How do you propose we deal with this issue of this growing terrorist threat?
Roger, I was very happy that the President went on in front of the nation and said we're going to do strategic bombing in Syria and Iraq. ISIS is a huge issue. They are barbarians. They need to be stopped. But I can't tell you how frustrated I am with the complete lack of foreign policy vision from this President and Al Franken. This President went into office 6 years ago, I remind you, saying, I'm just going to sit down with the leaders of Venezuela, North Korea, and Iran, and we'll make things work out. It's naive. The world is a more dangerous place today because we've not led. Leading from behind is a mistake. We had an ambassador that was killed in Benghazi, and we did nothing, and the world watched. And then this President drew a red line in Syria, which was crossed, and we did nothing, and the world watched. So there should be no surprise as to what happened in the Ukraine or in Gaza or now in Syria and Iran. And what's really scary are the facts that in Minnesota, we've become the #1 recruiting area for terrorists in Minnesota. And I'm really concerned about that. And I want to know what Al Franken has done over the last 6 years, because this didn't just happen with ISIS. This recruiting started in 2008, 2009 with Al-Shabaab. And it wasn't until a couple weeks ago that Al Franken sent a letter to the Attorney General. A letter. I mean, after this has been going on for multiple years. That's a day late and a dollar short, as my dad used to always say. I will fight for Minnesotans. I will fight for your security. I will make this world a safer place.
Thank you. Senator Franken?
This is a barbaric group, and they need to be degraded and destroyed. They pose a threat not just to the region, but to us. I voted to train and equip the moderate rebels in Syria. I support the bombing in Syria. ISIS doesn't observe the border between Iraq and Syria. We shouldn't either. Let's talk about this terrorist recruiting. This is incredibly devastating to the families. There are about two handfuls, about 10 or 12 Minnesotans that have been recruited to Iraq and to Syria. This was an issue right when I got there. In 2009, we knew that Shabab in Somalia was beginning to recruit from our communities. The first days that I was in office, I went to the FBI and got briefings on that in Washington. My first recess, I got briefings from the special agent in charge in St. Paul. I have worked with the community. I have worked with law enforcement. I pressed the Secretary of Homeland Security. I pressed the director of the FBI in hearings, in the judiciary hearings on this recruitment. And we diminished what was going on in terms of Shabab. And I sent a letter, to DOJ to ask them to spend more resources in our community. And you know what? They answered by saying, yes, we're going to do that. When I was at a community meeting just 2 weeks ago with Senator Klobuchar and Congressman Ellison, and the community understood that this was really important to get those resources in.
So a couple comments. Al, I'm glad you voted to support the President in the arming of Syrian rebels. I want to make sure the record is clear. This President was advised by every member of the National Security Council and his Secretary of State to arm the Free Syrian rebels 2 years ago, and he declined to do it. He was also advised by every member of the Chief of Staff, the military chief of, Army Chief of Staff, to keep a residual force in Iraq, and he declined to do so. So this is a president that Al Franken has supported 97% of the time. And when we talk about the terrorist recruitment in Minnesota, I've met with the community leaders in the East African community, and one of their biggest concerns is education. We have the worst education outcomes for minorities. The worst. Lower than 50%. And Al Franken sits on the education committee. He's complicit. These are the root causes that need to be addressed. I'll get them addressed. I'm a problem solver.
Thank you. Senator Franklin.
Okay, let's be clear about something. A little over a year ago, Mr. McFadden had the opportunity to weigh in on what to do in Syria after President Assad used chemical weapons. Every Republican candidate for the United States Senate was asked by Minnesota Public Radio for their views on what to do. Everyone answered except for Mr. McFadden. He refused to answer because it was a tough call. There are a lot of tough calls. It is easy to score political points from the bleachers. This is a serious job. You've got to make real choices in real time. Understand this. Every Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate was asked by NPR what they would do in Syria, and Mr. McFadden blinked.